For nearly 1,000 years, one artwork has shaped the way people imagine the Norman Conquest. The Bayeux Tapestry is often treated as a record of what happened in 1066, and at first glance, that's exactly what it appears to be. It shows kings, battles, invasions, and the death of Harold Godwinson at the Battle of Hastings. But what if that's only part of the story? Because the more closely you examine the tapestry, the stranger it becomes. Certain moments receive enormous attention, others are barely mentioned. Some figures are presented almost heroically, others seem to be quietly undermined. And before long, a question begins to emerge. Is the Bayeux Tapestry really telling us what happened? Or is it trying to persuade us how to think about what happened? Because if that's true, then this isn't simply one of the most important artworks of the medieval world. It may also be one of the most successful pieces of political storytelling ever created. One of the most important scenes in the entire tapestry takes place long before the Battle of Hastings. There are no armies, dramatic confrontations, or heroic last stands. Instead, we see Harold Godwinson placing his hands upon sacred relics and swearing an oath. At first glance, it doesn't seem especially significant, yet the tapestry gives this moment remarkable attention, and that alone should make us pause. Why does this scene matter so much? The answer lies in how an 11th century audience would have understood it. Today, breaking a political promise might damage your reputation. In the medieval world, an oath sworn upon holy relics carried a far greater weight. It was not simply a promise made to another person, it was a sacred commitment made before God. And that changes everything. Because if Harold truly swore support for William's claim to the English throne, and later took the crown for himself, then the story of 1066 begins to look very different. Harold is no longer simply defending England from a foreign invader. He becomes a man who broke a sacred oath. And William's invasion starts to appear less like an act of conquest and more like the enforcement of a legitimate claim. Whether that interpretation is entirely fair remains a matter of debate. Historians still argue about what really happened. But the more important question is why the creators of the tapestry wanted their audience to focus on this moment in the first place. Because once Harold is established as an oathbreaker, the rest of the story becomes much easier to tell. And the tapestry is only getting started. Not long after Harold takes the English throne, something unusual appears above the scene. A comet. Today we know it as Halley's Comet. We understand what it is, how it moves, and why it appears. The people who first viewed the tapestry did not. To medieval audiences, unusual events in the heavens often carried meaning. A comet was not simply an astronomical object. It could be interpreted as a warning, an omen, or even a sign of divine judgment. That is what makes its appearance here so interesting. The tapestry places the comet shortly after Harold's coronation, inviting viewers to connect the two events. It never explicitly tells us what the comet means. Instead, it relies on the assumptions and beliefs of its audience. The implication is subtle but powerful. Harold has taken the throne, then the heavens respond. Whether medieval viewers saw this as a coincidence is doubtful. The tapestry seems to be building a case, and each new scene strengthens it. First comes the oath, then comes the comet. Both encourage the audience to question Harold's legitimacy. And if Harold's claim is uncertain, William's claim becomes stronger. The next part of the tapestry is remarkable, not because of what happens, but because of how much attention it receives. Across multiple scenes, we watch the Norman invasion take shape. Trees are cut down, ships are built, weapons are gathered, horses are loaded onto vessels, supplies are prepared. At times it almost feels less like a story about war and more like a story about preparation. That raises an interesting question. Why spend so much time showing this? The creators could have rushed directly to the Battle of Hastings. Instead, they devote scene after scene to the organization behind the invasion. The effect is subtle but important. The Normans do not appear reckless or impulsive. They appear disciplined, organized, and professional. And at the center of it all stands William. Again and again, he is shown directing events, issuing commands, and leading his followers. The tapestry never stops to tell us he is a capable ruler. It doesn't need to. The images do the work for it. By the time the invasion fleet finally crosses the channel, William already feels like the sort of leader who is destined to succeed. And that may be exactly what the artists wanted their audience to think. If there is one image that defines the Bayeux Tapestry, it is this one. A king falls in battle. An arrow appears to strike his eye. The conquest reaches its climax. For generations, this scene has shaped how people imagine the death of Godwinson. It is one of the most famous images in medieval art. Yet the closer we look, the stranger it becomes. Historians have debated this scene for years. Is Harold actually the figure struck by the arrow, or is he the warrior collapsing beneath a Norman sword nearby? The answer is not entirely clear. Some scholars have even suggested that the famous arrow may have been added during later restoration work. If that is true, then one of the most recognizable images in English history may not have originally looked the way we imagine it today, but in a way that uncertainly only reinforces the larger point. Because throughout this video, we have been asking how the tapestry shapes our understanding of history. And here we find ourselves questioning one of its most famous images. Not because the event itself is unclear, Harold dies, William wins, but because even the details of that story have been filtered through centuries of interpretation. By the time we reach this scene, the tapestry has already guided us through a carefully constructed narrative. The oath, the comet, the preparation for invasion, everything points towards this moment. William's victory feels less like a surprise and more like the inevitable conclusion to a story that has been unfolding from the very beginning. By the time we reach the end of the Bayeux Tapestry, one thing becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. For all its detail, there are certain stories it seems remarkably uninterested in telling. The tapestry spends a great deal of time showing us William's preparations for the invasion. We watch ships being built, supplies being gathered, and armies assembling for war. We see Norman leaders making decisions, Norman soldiers advancing into battle, and Norman victory ultimately secured at Hastings. But there is far less interest in what came next. The conquest of England did not end on the battlefield. In many ways, it was only beginning. Yet the tapestry rarely lingers on the consequences of William's victory. It does not dwell on how England changed under Norman rule, nor does it spend much time exploring the perspective of those who oppose the conquest. Instead, its attention remains firmly relaxed on the events that justify William's claim and explain why he deserved to succeed. That choice is revealing, because the Bayeux Tapestry is often treated as though it simply records history. But like every artwork, it is shaped by decisions. Someone chose which scenes deserved space and which did not. Someone decided what viewers should pay attention to and what could remain in the background. When viewed in that way, the tapestry begins to feel less like a neutral account of 1066 and more like a carefully constructed case for William's legitimacy. Not an outright piece of propaganda in modern sense, but certainly an artwork with a point of view. And once you notice that, it becomes surprisingly difficult to unsee. By now, the answer to our original question is beginning to emerge. The Bayeux Tapestry is not simply showing us the Norman Conquest, it is guiding us towards a particular interpretation of it. Harold appears flawed, William appears legitimate, the conquest appears justified. Whether we agree with that interpretation today is almost beside the point, because the true achievement of the tapestry lies elsewhere. Nearly 1,000 years after it was created, we are still looking at it, still discussing it, still allowing it to shape how we imagine one of the most important events in English history. That is an extraordinary achievement for any artwork. The armies that fought at Hastings are long gone. The kingdom they fought over has changed beyond recognition. Yet the story stitched into this linen survives, and perhaps that is the tapestry's greatest victory. Not that it recorded history, but that it helped define it. The Bayeux Tapestry is often described as a masterpiece of medieval art, and it is. But it is also a reminder that artworks do more than preserve the past. They shape how future generations remember it. William conquered England in 1066, but the Bayeux Tapestry conquered something else. the story of that conquest itself, and nearly 1,000 years later, it is still winning.